He stood on the bench, calm as Sunday morning, staring down at the two cops who had thrown him face first onto cold metal just one night earlier. "Officers Dwyer, Hale," he said, taking off his glasses. "I recognize you. Next time you cuff someone at a gas station, check the bar card before you press his face to the hood." The room froze. Cameras clicked. A city held its breath. This wasn't revenge. It was reckoning. The black man they arrested for looking suspicious was now the judge deciding their fate. Before we dive into how a routine traffic stop turned into a courtroom earthquake that shook Chicago's justice system, hit that like button, drop where you're watching from, and buckle in. Because this is the story of what happens when power picks the wrong man to humiliate. And justice finally learns his name. They thought it would end there. Another stop, another night, another name lost in the paperwork. But truth doesn't stay buried. When the man in cuffs sits higher than the badge that broke him, what happened at that gas station didn't just spark outrage. It lit a fuse under an entire city. And by sunrise, the same man they dragged from his car was walking back into court. Not in chains, but in robes. Let's go back to where it started, the night the system forgot his name. The courtroom was so still you could hear the faint hum of the lights. Morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Cook County Circuit Court, glinting off the brass plate that read, "Honorable Isaiah J. Cole." He sat behind the bench, hands folded, eyes steady on the two officers standing before him. They froze when they saw him. "Officer Dwyer, Officer Hale," Isaiah said, removing his glasses, voice calm but sharpened to a blade. "I recognize you." Mark Dwyer's throat bobbed. Scott Hale blinked twice, the faint clatter of his handcuffs at his belt betraying the tremor in his fingers. Isaiah leaned forward, elbows resting on the oak surface. "Next time you cuff someone at a gas station," he said softly, "check the bar card before you press his face against the hood." A low ripple ran through the courtroom, the kind of murmur people make when history starts moving in real time. A reporter's camera clicked. Someone whispered, "That's him. That's the judge they arrested." Isaiah didn't look up. "Court will come to order," he said, tapping his gavel once. The sound cracked the air, clean in half. 12 hours earlier, Judge Isaiah Cole was just another man in a hoodie trying to get home. He'd spent most of the day sitting beside his mother in the cardiac wing at Rush University Medical Center, watching her heart monitor pulse in green waves. The doctors said she was stable. He'd believed them, mostly. It was past 9 when he left the hospital. The city glowed in tired light. Wet pavement, neon reflection, the dull hiss of tires on asphalt. He ditched his usual Navy suit for gray sweatpants and a Howard Law hoodie. Time 300 mammas. The first time in years he'd dressed like someone without a title. His BMW needed gas, so he pulled into the Quick Go station on Cicero and Lake. The pumps hummed under harsh fluorescence. A billboard for a personal injury lawyer loomed above the lot, promising justice in bold letters. He tapped his card, inserted the nozzle, and stared at the slow climb of numbers on the screen. He was still thinking about his mom's blood pressure when the patrol car rolled in. It circled once, slow, like a shark tracing its prey. Inside, 2 officers watched him. One gestured toward the pump. The cruiser rolled closer, its lights off, tires whispering over the concrete. Isaiah felt it before he saw it. The tightness at the base of his neck, the instinct older than his profession. He'd read 1,000 police reports, but reading them and living one were 2 different worlds. When the patrol car blocked him in, he knew the script. 2 doors opened. The taller one, Dwyer, rested his hand on his holster. "Evening," he said. "What are you doing here?" Isaiah glanced at the gas pump in his hand. "Pretty sure that's self-explanatory." "Let's see some ID." "Why?" "You matched the description of a suspect from a robbery last week. Isaiah's eyebrows lifted. What's the description besides black man in a hoodie? Hale shifted. Sir, we need you to comply. He took a breath. I'm reaching for my wallet. His voice was calm, deliberate, the tone he used with witnesses on the stand. My name is Isaiah Cole. I'm a judge with the Cook County Circuit Court. Dwyer laughed, a dry scoff. Sure you are, and I'm the mayor. The air changed then, electric, sharp. Dwyer's hand shot forward, grabbing Isaiah's arm, spinning him toward the car. Metal met bone. What are you doing? This is unnecessary. Stop resisting. I'm not resisting. The cuffs snapped shut, cutting into his wrists. The gas nozzle clattered to the pavement, spilling fuel in a small silver puddle that caught the light like broken glass. Across the lot, Raj Singh, the station manager, hurried out. Officers, please. He's a customer. A regular. Back inside, Dwyer barked. A young guy on a scooter raised his phone, camera flashing red. Yo, they're cuffing a dude for pumping gas. Isaiah was pushed toward the cruiser, head ducked, dignity leaking out with each step. The air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror swayed in his face. Pine scent and irony. The booking room at the 12th District was a long strip of green linoleum and bad lighting. A coffee machine burped in the corner. Sergeant Bruno DeMarco didn't look up from his clipboard. Name: Isaiah Cole. Occupation: judge. That got him a snort from another officer. Sure, and I'm Oprah, someone muttered. Isaiah said nothing. He'd spent his career reminding defendants to stay calm. Now he clung to his own advice like a lifeline. DeMarco waved him toward the counter. Empty your pockets. I'd like to make my phone call first. DeMarco looked up then, eyes narrowing. You'll get your call when I say so. From behind them, a young voice said quietly, Sergeant, I think I know him. Officer Andre Lewis stood in the doorway, coffee halfway to his mouth. Judge Cole lectured at the academy last year. Constitutional procedure. The room went still. DeMarco's jaw tightened. You sure? Yes, sir. DeMarco hesitated, then picked up the phone. Chief's gonna love this, he muttered. Minutes later, the door opened and Chief Alan Pritchard appeared. Tie loosened, smile too wide. Judge Cole! My God, what a terrible misunderstanding. Isaiah met his eyes. Indeed, one involving the Constitution, due process, and two of your officers. Pritchard cleared his throat. Let's get this straightened out. Can I offer you some coffee? The booking phone will be fine, Isaiah said evenly. Pritchard's grin flickered. Of course, Isaiah dialed. Linda, he said when Judge Park answered. It's me. Don't ask questions yet. Just know I'm at the 12th District, and not voluntarily. Her voice was steel. Do not sign a thing. By the time Officer Lewis drove him home, the city was a quilt of orange streetlight and shadow. The Scooter Kids video was already on Twitter. 48,000 views and counting. At his Bronzeville townhouse, the porch light was on. Felicia opened the door before he reached it. Her scrubs were wrinkled, hair tied back, eyes furious. Are you okay? She demanded. He nodded, voice hoarse. Physically. She folded her arms. Do I file a complaint tonight, or do you want the clean route first? The clean route, he said quietly, until it isn't. Malik appeared on the stairs, phone in hand. Dad, you're trending. Nia peeked from behind him, wide-eyed. Isaiah exhaled. The house smelled of lavender and disinfectant. His wife's way of scrubbing chaos. Later, when the kids were upstairs, Felicia sat beside him on the couch. Her phone buzzed with a new message. A nurse from Sinai just DM'd me, she said. Said those same cops brought in a patient last month. Young black guy. Calm, polite. They wrote, resisting arrest on his chart. Sound familiar? Isaiah stared at the window, the city lights blurred by rain. Find me that name, he said. Felicia scrolled, then read aloud. Devin Brooks. Outside, thunder rolled over Chicago. Inside, Isaiah leaned back, his wrists still ringed with faint red marks, his pulse finally steady. Tomorrow he'd return to his bench, and tomorrow the system that had forgotten his name would have to remember it again. Sleep didn't come. It hovered like a bus you could see down the block, but that never seemed to arrive. Isaiah lay staring at the ceiling, the faint outline of the ceiling fan blades cutting the dark into 4 quiet pieces. He could still feel the teeth of the handcuffs ghosting his skin. A heat that wasn't heat exactly, more like memory trying to leave a mark. Downstairs, the fridge hummed and clicked. Felicia had made tea he didn't drink. He listened to the house breathing, pipes yawning, wind nosing the old windows, Malik tossing once in his bed in that athletic way that even sleep couldn't flatten. The phone on the nightstand lit up every few minutes, that cold, blue notification glow that made the room look underwater. He finally rolled over, thumbed the screen. The Scooter Kids clip had jumped from thousands to hundreds of thousands of views. A local radio host quote tweeted it with, "Y'all, that's Judge Cole." Another tweet read, "If that's how they treated a judge, imagine." The sentence didn't finish. It didn't have to. Felicia came in quietly, a silhouette made of scrubs and resolve. She sat beside him, her hand finding the muscle at the base of his neck and pressing there until the ache in his jaw loosened. "You need to write down everything," she said, voice soft. "Before it blurs," he nodded. "I know." "Pain level?" "Light," he lied. She gave him the look she saved for men who tried to tough it out in her ER. Then she handed him an ice pack wrapped in a dish towel. "Be a good patient, Your Honor." He smiled without humor and pressed the cold against his cheekbone. The metal chill took him back for half a second. To the hood, the sound his breath made when the forearm hit, a sound he recognized from other men in other rooms who said, "I'm not resisting," and then learned the word meant something different to whoever was writing the report. "Malik's going to ask questions," Felicia said. "We need to be ready." "We've already had that talk." His mouth tasted of copper that wasn't there. "Hands visible. Yes, sir. No, sir. Ask permission before you move." "We had a talk," she said. "Not this talk." He looked at her and saw the line she was walking. Dr. Calm over Mother Quake. In the hospital, she talked in measured sentences that made damaged things seem fixable. Here, she spoke like someone who remembered what bodies looked like after they met the wrong kind of force. The phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced, frowned, swiped. "It's the nurse again." She handed him the screen. A second DM waited beneath the first. More careful, like the person had thought about it for a while and decided to say it anyway. "This probably isn't my place, but it's not sitting right. I triaged a kid last month, Devin Brooks. Cops said resisting. He was calm and yes-mamming the whole time. No tox, minor bruising consistent with forearm torque. They were in a rush to discharge him and get back to their shift. Same too your video shows, if that helps." Isaiah stared at the words until they seemed to unblur. "Can you get her to send me his contact?" Felicia nodded, typed, waited. "Got it," she said after a minute, and a new message pinged with Devin's number and a cautious thumbs up. In the morning, he would call, not tonight. Tonight, the anger still ran hot enough to warp the truth around it, and if there was one thing he'd learned over 20 years in rooms where words became consequences, it was that heat made people stupid. He got up, padded barefoot to his office, and turned on the desk lamp. The warm circle of light pooled over his copy of the Illinois Code of Judicial Conduct like a sun on paper. He thumbed to Canon 2, then Canon 3, the words familiar and unforgiving. "The judge shall act at all times in a manner that promotes public confidence in the independence, integrity, and impartiality of the judiciary. A judge shall disqualify himself or herself in any proceeding in which the judge's impartiality might reasonably be questioned." He'd taught those canons to new judges. He'd quoted them to reporters in tight situations. He knew their spirit, not just their letters. Impartiality didn't demand ignorance. It required discipline. He read case notes he'd annotated years ago, the yellow highlights uneven, like a road through hills. There were opinions where judges with personal knowledge still presided. Because the knowledge wasn't about the case at hand, because reality didn't disqualify you from perceiving. There were opinions where they stepped aside too, when the air got too muddied to breathe. He closed the book and sat with his hands in his lap. You can recuse yourself out of caution, he thought, or you can stay and carry the responsibility like weight in your palms. Both were ethical choices. Only one, tonight, felt like an echo of that hood, that word, that insistence that reality be made smaller than it was. The house creaked. On the bookshelf behind him, a photo of his mother at his swearing-in tilted slightly, as if she'd shifted to get a better look at him. He got up and straightened the frame. In the picture, she had on a church hat that shaded half her face and made her look like a jazz singer from the good part of history. Her smile was private and proud. His phone buzzed again, a text this time. Unknown number. Judge Cole? This is Officer Lewis. Sorry to text so late. Wanted you to know your car is still at Quick Go. Manager Raj said he'll keep it off the tow list. Also, sir, for what it's worth, I'm sorry for what you went through tonight. Isaiah typed, Thank you, Officer Lewis. He paused, then added, This isn't your fault. Do the right thing when it's yours to do. Then he deleted that last sentence and wrote instead, I appreciate the ride home. He put the phone face down and watched the desk lamp pool again. A thin line pulsed in his peripheral vision, the notification light still insisting. He ignored it. He opened a legal pad, wrote the date at the top like a courtroom habit that refused to die, and began to write. Blue BMW X5. Pump 7, Cicero and Lake, Quick Go. 9:17 p.m. Dwyer, tall, crew cut, right hand rides holster. Hale, lighter build, taut mouth. What are you doing here? Pretext, asked for ID. Why? No reasonable articulable suspicion offered beyond matches description. Stated reaching for wallet. Identified self, dismissed. Physical contact initiated by Dwyer, forearm plus shoulder torque. Hood impact. Stop resisting repeated while compliant. Cuffs high. Search incidental to arrest. No probable cause established on scene. Third-party witness Raj Singh protested. Bystander video by male, approx. Early 20s, scooter. Booking, Sergeant DeMarco. Phone call delayed, then permitted once identity flagged by Officer Lewis. Chief Pritchard presented misunderstanding language. Declined special treatment. Called Judge Park, released without charges. He paused, circled matches description, and wrote define. Time 300 malams. Then drew a line to furtive movements and high crime area. Cliché phrases he'd read so often they lost edges. His pen hovered over the page. He added Devin Brooks underneath, boxed the name, and drew a small arrow like he was reminding his future self where to go. Upstairs, a door clicked, and small feet patted the hallway. Nia's knock was soft, almost musical. Dad, you awake? Yeah. She opened the door as if entering a library. Oversized sweatshirt, hair in a puff. In her hand, one of her sketch pads hugged to her chest. I drew something, she said, voice pitched for the quiet. Is it okay? He nodded. She flipped the pad and showed him a cartoon that looked nothing like a joke, a judge's gavel casting a shadow shaped like a gas pump nozzle. Under the shadow, a figure in a hoodie looked up. Not scared, but alert, the way someone looks when they decide to memorize the face of a moment. I didn't put words, she said. Didn't feel like it needed them. Isaiah's throat tightened. It's good. She shrugged like she hadn't been waiting to hear that. Mom said sometimes drawing it helps. She slid the sketch pad onto his desk, stepped closer, and brushed her fingers over the faint marks around his wrists. "Does it hurt?" He shook his head, then decided to tell her the kind of truth that teaches as it admits. "A little." "Okay." She stood in the doorway like a very small guard. "Good night, Dad." "Night, Peanut." When she was gone, he sat a while longer. Thoughts arrived singly and then began to crowd. Andre at the academy, listening with the careful hunger of a rookie, the driver in his courtroom last month, a college kid who'd said they smelled marijuana through the trunk, the defense attorney who'd rolled her eyes like the sky was made of excuses. He wondered, not for the first time, how many truths he had accepted because the language had been sanded smooth by repetition. His mother's face in the photo watched him think. He turned back to the legal pad, flipped a page, and wrote a list. Call Devin Brooks, Mount Sinai, CNA. Email Parker in Court Tech, pull docket for AM. Reach Raj Singh, Quick Go manager. Ask to preserve footage from tonight plus any date around 3/18 that aligns with Devin. Ask Park to be on standby re-ethical consultation. Document injuries, photos. Felicia. No interviews, no statements until record exists. He took out his phone, snapped a couple of pictures of his wrists under the desk light, the red rings already fading like the way a storm seems to apologize after it leaves. Felicia patted in again and raised an eyebrow at the impromptu photo shoot. He shrugged. "Evidence," he said. She gave him a small smile and a roll of gauze. "Evidence can also be iced." By 3, the condo settled into deep quiet, the kind that felt like a blanket. He turned the lamp off and the office went soft. In the dark, the city outside remembered him without needing to be watched. He got into bed and found sleep waiting where it hadn't been earlier, as if it had decided he'd earned it. The alarm hit too soon, that cheap marimba that sounded like kindness with a deadline. He showered, the water finding new tenderness in his ribs. In the mirror, a faint yellow was just beginning under the skin where Dwyer's arm had pressed him into metal. He fastened his tie, the navy silk, a small ceremony that called his spine to attention. Felicia poured coffee into a travel mug and snapped the lid with the authority of a person who saves lives on a Tuesday. "You sure you want to go in?" she asked, masking worry under a question doctors ask patients when they already know the answer. "If I don't," he said, "the story will be about the judge who hid." She slid a Ziploc over the leftover ice pack and tucked it into a brown paper bag. "For the ride. Don't make me page you in your own courtroom to remind you to use it." He laughed. The sound felt like a stretch he hadn't allowed himself. He kissed her forehead, then paused. "I'm going to call Devin at lunch," he said, "if he'll talk." "Text him first," she said, slipping him a post-it with the number in her neat, angular handwriting. "And Isaiah?" "Yeah." "Let someone see you today. Andre, Linda, Elena Morales if she's in the building. Don't carry this whole thing alone like it's a bench you can deadlift." He nodded, pocketed the post-it, and left. Outside, the air was crisp and impatient, as if the day had somewhere important to be and wanted him to keep up. He took a rideshare and asked to be dropped 2 blocks from the courthouse to avoid cameras. The driver, a woman in her 60s with a Cubs keychain dangling from the ignition, glanced at him in the rear view and said, "You're the guy, right?" "Which guy?" he said, buying a second to decide. "The one they cuffed at the pump. My niece sent me the clip. You all right?" "I'm okay," he said, and meant it in the narrow sense. She nodded, then surprised him. "When I was 20, they could have cuffed me for smoking a cigarette wrong if I'd stood in the wrong place. I'm glad you're in a robe. Don't let them scare you off the job, baby." He smiled. "I won't." The courthouse smelled like paper and disinfectant and old air conditioning. Isaiah flashed his badge to security and slid through the side entrance. The metal detector beeped for the man behind him, who shrugged and took off his belt, the clink of the buckle somehow sounding like applause in an empty theater. Upstairs, in the corridor outside courtroom 25, his clerk Parker looked up from a stack of files, eyes a little wider than usual. "Morning, Judge." "Morning, Parker." He took the files, their weight both familiar and newly loaded. "Anything on the docket I should know about?" Parker hesitated. "Just unusual interest today." She tilted her chin toward a cluster of reporters, stationed far enough away to be tactful and close enough to be useless. "Also, I flagged one case for you." She tapped the top folder. Public Defender Morales filed late supplements last night on a civil rights complaint hearing. She's good when she's caffeinated and, well, she's always caffeinated. He nodded, put the folder under his arm. He would read it on the bench before they called the case, the way he always did. Routine was a kind of lifeline. You held it until the flood receded. His phone buzzed. A text from Andre Lewis. "Judge, just a heads up. Raj pulled footage from last night. Says he's got older clips too. He'll hold on to everything. Also, sir, are you safe to walk in? Lot of cameras out front. I came in the side," Isaiah wrote. "Tell Raj thank you. I'll contact him officially." He paused in the doorway of his chambers and looked at the chair behind the bench. He'd sat there 1,000 times. Today it felt a half-inch taller and a pound heavier. He let his hand rest on the back of it, just long enough for the energy of the room to recognize him. He hung his coat, set the files in a neat stack, and flipped open the top one. Morales' case. The first line made him blink. Complainant, Devin Brooks. Officers named Mark Dwyer and Scott Hale. His breath paused, then restarted with the slow discipline of a swimmer. He didn't speak. He didn't let the room take his voice. He took a pen, drew a small, almost invisible dot beside Devin's name. Not surprise, confirmation. Not fate, pattern. He checked the clock. 37 minutes to call. Enough time to read, to decide, to prepare the words that needed to be said without sounding like they'd been drafted in anger. Through the chamber door, he heard the courtroom filling. Shoes on tile, the buzz of polite conversations that wanted to be whispers, the scrape of a chair pulled back in a way that made it clear the person sitting meant to stay. He slipped the post-it with Devin's number into his inside pocket, the paper warm against his shirt as if it had borrowed heat from his decision. His phone pinged one more time. "Felicia, of course. Remember, ICE. And don't let them write your story for you." He smiled at the screen and put the phone face down on his desk. Outside, the bailiff's voice carried through wood and air. "All rise." Isaiah stood, smoothed his tie, and walked toward the door. The metal handle was cool in his palm, the gavel familiar in his other hand like a promise he intended to keep. He stepped through into light and faces and a silence that wanted meaning. The room turned its attention the way wheat turns toward wind. He did not announce a new chapter. He did what he always did. He took his seat on the bench and set the day in motion. By the time Isaiah settled his robe over his shoulders and the gavel found its spot on the bench, courtroom 25 had taken on the feeling of a theater right before curtain. Every cough louder than it should be, every whisper carrying twice as far. Reporters anchored the back row like polite scavengers. 2 officers in uniform stood along the side wall, postures too erect to be casual. In the second row, a young man with careful posture and a pressed shirt folded both hands on his knees and stared straight ahead. "Calling the matter of Devin Brooks v. City of Chicago et al., the clerk announced, voice steady. "Preliminary hearing on civil rights complaint." Isaiah glanced at the table to his left. Public Defender Elena Morales elbowed a coffee cup out of the way and stood, every inch of her radiating the kind of focus caffeine pretends to offer. Next to her, the young man stood as well. "Mr. Brooks is present, Your Honor," she said. "Elena Morales for the complainant." At the defense table, a silver-haired man in a crisp pinstripe rose with the air of someone who expects doors to open before he reaches them. Victor Lang for Officers Dwyer and Hale and the city. On the aisle, a woman in a dark blazer stood halfway, then seemed to think better of it. Rachel Klein for the state's attorney's office, she added carefully. Here to observe. Isaiah nodded, eyes moving, pulse controlled. He tapped the case file once, a metronome for his own mind. On appearances noted, he said. Miss Morales, you may proceed with your opening. Lang lifted a finger. Before we wade in, Your Honor, a preliminary matter. The room shifted its attention, like a flock turning midair. Lang stepped to the lectern and smoothed the edge of a paper no one needed smoothed. Respectfully, the defense moves for your immediate recusal, he said, tone modulated to register as reasonable, on camera. Canon 3 of the Illinois Code, appearance of impropriety, questions as to impartiality, etc. You were allegedly involved in an incident last night with my clients. The optics are obvious. The law is clear. There it was, spoken into the air where the microphones could catch it. Murmurs rolled once through the gallery and then flattened again. Isaiah folded his hands. He could feel the bruise under his collarbone, remembering its color. He kept his voice even. Ms. Morales? Morales slid to the lectern like a sprinter to a mark. We oppose, she said. Impartiality does not mean ignorance. The matter before the court concerns my client, Mr. Brooks, on a date prior to last night. The judge's lived reality, however inconvenient to the defense, does not disqualify him from understanding the facts. If that were the standard, a judge who survived cancer could never hear a malpractice suit, and a woman judge could never preside over sexual harassment. Neutrality is not amnesia. A few heads in the back nodded, as if they'd been waiting for somebody to say it out loud. Isaiah looked to Klein. State? Klein's mouth made the smallest of lines. The people take no position, Your Honor, she said, and if neutrality were a coat, it would have looked exactly like the one she was wearing. Isaiah considered the space between silence and speech. He could feel Lang's stare, expectant, and Morales's breath, coiled. He could feel his own ribs lift and settle. Motion denied, he said. Justice is blind to favoritism, not to facts. The court can separate last night's events from the evidence in front of it today. The objection is noted and preserved. We proceed. Lang's jaw tightened 0.5 millimeter. If there had been a camera pointed only at his knuckles, you would have seen them pale and then pink again. Morales waited for the breath to leave the room and then seized the gap. We call Devin Brooks. The young man stood, moved to the witness stand, like he was carrying something fragile that didn't belong to him. He swore in, right hand up, voice soft but clear, and took his seat. Mr. Brooks, Morales said, standing where he could see only her and not the 100 curious eyes behind her. Tell the court what happened on March 18th, coming off your shift. He licked his lip once, found his voice. I'm a CNA at Mount Sinai, he began, careful, the way you talk when you know every word is a tightrope. I was driving home. It was almost midnight. I use Cicero sometimes because I live off Jackson, and the highway's crazy at that hour. A squad started following me a few blocks. I checked my speed. I was at 30. Then the light went on, so I pulled over. What did they say? One of them came up, big guy. He said my tail light was out. I said, I didn't know that, officer. He said he smelled marijuana. Devin glanced down, then back up. I don't smoke. What did you do next? I said I was coming from the hospital. He told me to step out. I did. I put my hands on the hood like they said. I asked if I could call my mom to tell her I'd be late. She waits up. And he said, stop being difficult. Devin's mouth tightened for a second, then relaxed again. They cuffed me. It was tight. They pushed my arm up and I said, ow, but not loud. They searched my car. They didn't find anything. They took me in for resisting an obstruction. Morales nodded, slow, like agreement could be a rope you threw to someone so they'd keep talking. How would you describe your behavior? I was Good, he said, and there was a ripple of something like a laugh in the gallery, the kind that stings because you know it's true. Polite. My mama taught me. Yes, sir. No, sir. Hands where they could see. Morales held up a paper. Your Honor, Sinai intake notes from that night produced under subpoena. No intoxicants detected. Bruising consistent with forearm torque. Chain of custody intact. She extended it to the clerk, who brought it to the bench. Lang stood. Objection. Foundation. Overruled. Admitted, Isaiah said, reading the clinician's neat script without letting his face show anything but the fact of it. Were you charged? Devin shook his head. No, they let me go, said it was my lucky night. Anything else from that evening stand out? There was a lady outside her building, he said, smoking. She said, You okay, baby? When they put me in the car, I said yes, but I wasn't. Morales turned, scanned the gallery, and lifted a hand. A woman in a dental scrub's top stood, a phone clutched like a talisman. Your name for the record? Morales asked. Shauna Du Bois, the woman said. Ms. Du Bois, did you record anything that night? Shauna nodded. Yes, ma'am. Your Honor, we move to admit People's Exhibit 3, bystander video recorded contemporaneously. Morales offered a tablet. A bailiff dimmed the lights with the grace of a man who has been waiting for his cue. On the screen, the night came back. The way sodium lights turn skin into a palette not meant for human stories. Devin was visible in profile, hands open, the words, I'm not resisting, audible under the overlapping commands. No raised voice, no sudden motion. The clip ended before the cuffs lifted behind his shoulder blades, but the mood of it hung in the room like cigarette smoke. Lang rose, smoothing his tie. The video doesn't show the alleged aggression that followed, Your Honor. The officer's report indicates escalating behavior. Morales didn't look at him. Funny thing about escalation, she said. It tends to break the cameras. Isaiah kept his eyes on the screen, another heartbeat, then nodded. Admitted. The court will weigh it accordingly. Morales lifted another exhibit. Also, Your Honor, a mechanics. Certification dated March 19th indicating all lights functioning, tail lights intact. Lang half stood again. Isaiah glanced at him, and Lang sat like the floor had bowed under his feet. There was movement at the back of the courtroom, a ripple through the audience. Raj Singh eased into a seat, clutching a small black hard drive like it might jump. He looked at Isaiah, then at the floor, then at the aisle as if ready to sprint should anyone tell him to turn around. Morales noticed him and smiled with only her eyes. We call Rajinder Singh. Raj took the stand, swore in, sat, and put the hard drive down as gently as if it were a sleeping child. I managed the quick go at Cicero and Lake, he said. 20 years. I know a lot of faces. I know judges sometimes. I don't always know they are judges. Mr. Singh, did officers Dwyer and Hale frequent your business? Every few nights, he said. They park, they drink coffee, they talk. Did you review footage from March 18th? He nodded. After I saw... Last night, I checked my logs. We keep 14 days on a loop. I pulled the night Mr. Brooks says he was stopped. He tapped the hard drive. Audio is fuzzy, but it's there. The time stamps match. Lang rose like a spring. Objection to late surprise exhibits, Your Honor. Discovery. Conditional admission, Isaiah said, crisp. Defense will have opportunity to review. Proceed, Ms. Morales. Raj's eyes flicked to Isaiah, a quick, grateful flash, then back to Morales. The video played, grainy, from the overhead dome camera above the counter. Dwyer and Hale leaned near the coffee machines. Their words were muffled, but not so much that the phrases didn't land. Hale, we're 2 stops short, man. Dwyer, Southside'll get you numbers. Someone in the gallery said, in a way that sounded like the underside of a prayer. Lang's pen finally made a sound. Mr. Singh, Morales said softly, thank you. Chief Pritchard took the stand next, the circumference of his smile trimmed down to official. He adjusted the mic as if the mic were to blame for the questions that had brought him there. "Chief," Morales began, "does CPD impose quotas on officers for stops or arrests?" "No," he said, smooth. "Quotas are illegal. We employ activity metrics to encourage proactive policing and ensure coverage." "Activity metrics," she repeated, as if trying the phrase on. "And how are these metrics measured?" "Various indicators," he said. "Stops, contacts, community engagement." "Do those metrics affect performance reviews, promotions?" "They're part of a holistic evaluation." Morales took a step closer. "And if an officer doesn't hit expected activity levels?" "They may be counseled on initiative," he said, the word counseled landing like a small bruise. "So," Morales said, turning slightly so the room could hear each syllable, "an officer who makes more stops is likely to be seen as more proactive." Lang objected to form. Isaiah overruled. Pritchard said, "We expect lawful stops." "Yet," Morales said, "the data we've subpoenaed," she patted a thick binder, "shows a pattern of stops clustered in predominantly black and Latino neighborhoods, with lower hit rates for contraband than in majority white areas. If the fishing is good, Chief, why are the nets so empty?" Pritchard's jaw worked once. "We'll need to review the underlying—" "We will," Isaiah said, and his tone did what his gavel usually did. When Officer Andre Lewis took the stand, he looked younger than he had in the booking room. Truth has a way of doing that, shaving years and adding weight. He sat, swore, and met Isaiah's eyes for a fraction of a second, then fixed his gaze on Morales. "Officer Lewis," she began, "how long on the job?" 14 months. "In that time, how have you been trained regarding stops?" He swallowed. "Officially, we're drilled on reasonable suspicion. Articulate your basis, write it clean. Unofficially—" He paused, then kept going. "Unofficially, you learn the words that hold up." "What words?" "Furtive movements, match the description, appeared nervous, high crime area. You write those, it reads like a picture." "Were you present the night Judge Cole was brought to booking?" He nodded. "Yes." "What did you observe?" He hesitated, then let the story out. "A lot of jokes until they realized who he was. I heard Officer Dwyer say, 'Got another one,' before the room shifted. Then Sergeant called upstairs. The vibe turned careful, and later," he looked down. "Later I heard someone from dispatch on the phone with a supervisor. It sounded like they were updating the call log to add a suspicious person complaint retroactively, like making the narrative fit." The room went so quiet you could hear paper settle. Lang stood. "Objection. Hearsay." "Overruled for the limited purpose of explaining the witness's observations," Isaiah said. "Counsel can cross." He did, and Lewis held. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest. By the time he stepped down, sweat had bled through his uniform at the back under the weight of telling the truth in a room that had learned to live without much of it. At defense table, Scott Hale had gone pale to the edges. He leaned into Lang, whispered something Lang didn't want to hear, and then stood. "Your Honor," Lang said, voice tighter. "Officer Hale requests a brief conference in chambers with counsel and the court." Eyes in the gallery did the darting math of gossip. Isaiah weighed the request, then nodded. 5-minute recess. Counsel Mr. Hale, Ms. Morales, court reporter only. In chambers, the air was cooler. Isaiah gestured to the chairs. Hale didn't sit. He stood like a man waiting on a verdict, knuckles white on the back of the chair he wasn't using. Lang tried to speak for him. Hale lifted a hand. "I need to say it," he murmured. "Sir." Isaiah kept his face neutral, the way you do when you want someone to keep talking. "Go ahead." Hale's voice came out flat, as if emotion had been sanded off to make the words fit through a narrow chute. "We're told how to write it," he said. Not on paper, in the car. The older guys show you how to phrase it so it holds. You put furtive in there, it sounds like you saw a thing. You say match the description, nobody asks what description. Activity drops, you get called soft. Activity goes up, they call you a go-getter. He pressed his lips together, then unclenched them. There's pressure. From supervisors. From the culture. We fish where we're told there are fish. It becomes habit. And last night, with the judge, we had no reason, really. He was black in a hoodie at a pump. That was the reason. I'm not proud of it. I'm telling you because I don't know how to carry it if I don't. Morales didn't breathe for 3 seconds. Lang rubbed his brow like he could erase a sentence that had just been written in permanent marker. Isaiah wrote one note on a yellow pad. Culture defense, truth ipsos leverage for change. He set the pen down. Thank you, officer, he said. Return to council. We'll reconvene. Back on the bench, the atmosphere had changed. It wasn't victory or defeat. It was the hush that comes when theater drops and the room realizes it has been seeing people, not roles. Lang tried to tug the hearing back onto familiar rails. Your Honor, this continues to spiral far beyond the scope. We came to address one complaint. This is a referendum on... Isaiah lifted a palm. When one thread tugs at a whole garment, Mr. Lang, you don't blame the sweater for unraveling. You check the loom. He turned to Morales. One more witness before lunch. Morales nodded as if she'd been waiting for that exact pronouncement. We called Dr. Tasha Ellison. A woman in a charcoal suit with tortoiseshell glasses stood, carrying a thin laptop and the settled authority of someone whose evidence doesn't need adjectives. Dr. Ellison, Morales said. Credentials? PhD in criminology, she answered. UIC, my research focuses on stop data, hit rates, and constitutional compliance across urban police departments. Did you analyze 3 years of CPD stop data for the 12th district? I did, she said, clicking once. The screens behind the bench lit with a map of the west side. Red and orange blooms pulsed in Garfield Park, North Lawndale, Little Village, then cooled as the map drifted north and east. Controlling for calls for service, time of day, crime category mix, and officer deployment, stops per 1,000 residents are concentrated here, she pointed, with significantly lower contraband hit rates than in low-stop zones. In other words, more fishing, fewer fish. Bottom line? Morales asked. Patterns are inconsistent with a neutral application of reasonable suspicion, Dr. Ellison said. The language high crime area functions as a catch-all to justify stops in spaces already over-policed. Terms like furtive and appeared nervous are applied disproportionately to Black and Latino residents. She gestured. The numbers don't lie, they just reveal the ones who do. Lang objected, and the objection went the way of bad weather. Acknowledged and then moving on. Through it all, Devin sat at council table, hands still folded, eyes distant, like he was trying to stay inside a moment that kept trying to jerk him out of it. When court broke for lunch, he stood in the aisle to call his mother. They saw me today, Ma, he said into the receiver, a small laugh tucked inside his voice. Not just my file. Outside, the noon crowd pressed to the marble steps, cameras raised. A hashtag bloomed on phones and then on cardboard. #gas station judge. Another sign, handwritten and stubborn, read, Neutrality amnesia. Isaiah stepped back into chambers and sat for a moment without moving. The room was quiet, but the day wasn't done. On his desk, under the legal pad, the post-it with Devin's number warmed under the lamp. He slid it out, ran a thumb over the ink like he was affirming a promise, and tucked it back again. Parker knocked and poked her head in. Judge, Elena asked if we could resume 5 minutes early. She says she's got one more thing. He nodded. Tell her the court appreciates punctual surprises. When he took the bench again, Elena was already standing, her eyes brighter than before. Next to her, Andre Lewis had returned and stood at the rail, hands behind his back in a parade rest that looked nothing like rest. "Your Honor," Morales said, "after the break, an officer approached me. He's willing to testify under seal to protect against retaliation. He corroborates the existence of activity benchmarks that function as quotas, and there's more." Lang started to object, but Isaiah raised a hand. "The court will hear the testimony under seal. The search for truth is not a spectator sport." The bailiff ushered 5 officers into the jury room over the next 20 minutes. Names sealed, faces kept out of the gallery's sight. The transcript would be redacted. The gist, however, washed back into the courtroom like a tide whose schedule no one could ignore. Slack messages from a supervisor at month's end reading numbers, folks. You know the drill. A coaching ride-along where a sergeant pointed at a Lexus and said, "Lane, hold, stop, let's go." Instructions to write appeared nervous when the reason was black guy at midnight. By the time Chief Pritchard returned to the stand for redirect, his tie had lost its confidence. Morales didn't pound. She didn't need to. "Chief," she said softly, "if your policy prohibits race as a factor, how do you explain these disparities when the noise is stripped away?" Pritchard picked at a thread on his cuff. "We're reviewing," he said. Isaiah looked down at his notes. A thin line of pen had darkened around one word, reviewing. He drew a second line until it became a box and then put a period after it, large as a stamp. "Ms. Morales," he said, "you may call your final witness for the day." She nodded. "No further witnesses at this time, Your Honor. We would ask the court to take judicial notice of the pattern evidence and set remedies briefing for tomorrow." Lang straightened. "Your Honor, the court will set briefing after closing statements," Isaiah said. He looked at his clerk, then back to counsel. He had spoken so many times from this bench, but today the bench felt closer to his bones than it ever had, like the oak, and he were in on something together. He didn't say the word chapter. He didn't have to. The room had shifted into a new gear, and the sound it made was the sound a city makes when a story stops being a clip on a timeline and starts being a fact someone has to live with. Court will recess until interpret as time. 10 a.m. tomorrow, he said, voice steady. The gavel came down once, a clean strike that echoed all the way out to the steps, where the signs waited and the microphones blinked and the air was full of people ready to hear the part where the law starts sounding like a promise again. Morning came in the same color as the courthouse limestone, pale, patient, unblinking. By 8:30 the steps were a slow-moving river of bodies, signs tucked against coats, cameras blinking red eyes. A news chopper idled somewhere above the loop like a restless thought. Inside courtroom 25 had the quiet tension of a held note. The ceiling fans whispered. The clock's second hand refused to hurry, as if time itself were reluctant to walk into whatever this was becoming. Isaiah was already on the bench when the bailiff called the room to order. He didn't need to bang the gavel. Presence, when tuned right, does the job with less noise. He scanned counsel table. Elena Morales had traded yesterday's coffee for a bottle of water and a stack of color-coded tabs. Victor Lang arrived with 2 binders and a face that said he'd barely slept but wouldn't give you the satisfaction of noticing. Scott Hale kept his eyes on the wood grain. Mark Dwyer sat with his chin tucked forward, a boxer's posture without the mouthpiece. "We are reconvened," Isaiah said, voice even. "We'll pick up where we left off. Counsel, be mindful that we're expanding the record. Facts, not theatrics." He glanced toward the gallery. A man in a yellow shirt, just a guy, not media, not clergy, had both hands clasped like he was praying for whichever version of Chicago still believed in promises. It landed on Isaiah in a place robes don't cover. "Elena," he said, "your witness." She rose. "Your Honor, we recall Dr. Tasha Ellison for foundational questions on the dataset the court has temporarily sealed." Dr. Ellison returned with her laptop tucked like a thin book, wire-framed glasses catching the tall window light. She was not the loudest person in any room, which is how you know she's dangerous. Data, when done, right, doesn't need to shout. Dr. Ellison, Morales said, since yesterday, have you prepared visualizations responsive to the court's questions? Yes. Ellison's fingers moved, and the screens behind the bench flared with a city grid. Heat bloomed in Garfield Park, North Lawndale, Little Village. Red and orange bruises on a pale map. Stops per 1,000 residents over a 3-year window, normalized for calls for service, time of day, offense mix, and patrol assignment. And hit rates for contraband? Morales asked. Ellison tapped again. The heat retreated, replaced by cool blues where stop volume was lowest. Inverse relationship, she said. More stops, fewer fines. Fishing where the fish aren't, unless the fish you're after is the stop itself. Lang slid to the lectern, smile ready like a retractable blade. Dr. Ellison, you're familiar with the idea that correlation isn't causation? Very, she said. Then you'd agree there could be confounders your models don't capture. There are always variables you wish you had, Ellison said, but if you remove the noise you can remove, and the pattern still sings the same tune, that's information. If your fishing net only fits one river, stop calling the fish a coincidence. A ripple of breath rolled through the room, somewhere between a chuckle and a hymn. Thank you, Doctor, Isaiah said. The court takes judicial notice of the demonstratives for limited purposes. Elena lifted a new folder. Next, Your Honor, we move to admit under seal the whistleblower statements from 5 officers of the 12th District, identities protected pending formal safeguards. Lang was on his feet before she'd finished. Objection. Star Chamber, anonymous accusers, this is not... Isaiah held up a palm. The court isn't trying anyone today. We're testing a system. The statements come in for pattern, for practice, subject to cross if. Identities are disclosed in appropriate settings. Objection overruled. Proceed. The bailiff ushered the officers back through the jury door one by one. The gallery couldn't see faces, only a silhouette, a bad shape, a hand that wouldn't stop worrying the brim of a hat. The court reporter took it down in that stenographic shorthand only a handful can read, the rest of us condemned to the translation later. The first officer spoke of end-of-month emails, activity lagging, get proactive, you know the drill. The second described coaching ride-alongs, where a supervisor would point and narrate reasons. Lane drift, tag frame, obscured sticker, write the stop you can defend later. The third had screenshots, Slack messages where a lieutenant dropped a winking emoji next to a boast about bringing the heat to the right corners. The fourth told a story so small it landed like a punch. Float near Whole Foods for walk and talks, near liquor stores for productive stops. The fifth took a breath before saying the part everyone had been thinking, appeared nervous is what you write when black at midnight is what you mean. Isaiah watched eyes rather than mouths. Andre Lewis stared at the empty witness chair like it might confess something back to him if he waited long enough. Hale pressed thumb and forefinger into the bridge of his nose, then exhaled as if a bolt had finally loosened. Chief Pritchard sat at the back with his counsel, the muscle at his jaw working. When Morales called him back to the stand, his smile tried to return and then thought better of it. Chief, she said, you heard the statements. I did. Do they comport with city policy? No, he said, one syllable, flat as drywall. Do they comport with city culture? A beat. He glanced at the gallery, then at the judge. Culture is complicated. Let's simplify, Morales said. If your policy forbids using race as a factor, and your data shows race is predictive of who gets stopped even after controls, and your officers whisper phrases that function as passwords to courts, what do you call that? Pritchard's tongue touched a canine, an old habit from years of chewing the next sentence. I call it a problem that we're addressing, he said. What's the first step? Review, he said. Isaiah didn't sigh, but every fiber in him wanted to. You'll have more than review on your plate by this afternoon, he said, not unkindly. Lang approached for redirect, framing questions like neutral interstates that hide their exits well. Chief, do you condone unlawful stops? No. Do you support ongoing training? Yes. Do you agree that numbers need context? Context matters, he said. Elena had more. We call Dr. Layla Bishop. A woman in a green blazer stood, carrying nothing but a legal pad and the look you see on ER doctors after a hard night, unsentimental compassion. Dr. Bishop, your field. Cognitive psychology. Decision-making under uncertainty. Police-citizen interaction, stress responses. In plain language, what happens when an officer barks commands at a person whose nervous system is already flooded? Compliance drops. Risk rises, Dr. Bishop said, simple as gravity. Cortisol spikes, fine motor control goes. People freeze, fumble, fidget. Those are read as furtive. The brain mislabels fear as guilt. From the back row came community voices, sanctioned testimony this time, not just murmurs with teeth. A retired teacher named Mrs. Arnett, hair silver and righteous, told the court she keeps her church fan in the glove box to give my hands something to do when the blue lights hit so they won't twitch and get me a bullet. A bodega owner from Little Village said, my cameras never glitch when a kid steals a Kit Kat, but they always die when someone's nose starts bleeding. Isaiah let them talk, not because they were strictly necessary for the record, but because every century or so, the law needs to hear the thing it claims to regulate in the language of the people who survive it. He made notes that weren't for appellate review. Church fan / Kit Kat / cortisol. If a judge is never surprised, he's not listening. Lang finally rose, trying to herd this back into something he recognized. Your Honor, with respect, this has become an indictment of a city, not a hearing for two officers. Scope creep is not justice. Isaiah leaned forward, not harsh, almost conversational. When one thread tugs many garments, Mr. Lang, you don't shame the sweater for unraveling. You look at the loom. The court will do that, carefully, with remedies scaled to evidence. Andre Lewis raised his hand from the row behind counsel. Isaiah nodded. Officer Lewis? He stood. Your Honor, after yesterday, some folks reached out. They asked if this court, if you, would consider letting them talk without their names being posted all over Facebook by Friday. They aren't saints, neither am I, but they're tired. They got kids in these neighborhoods too. They want to do the job the way you taught us in that guest lecture. Articulate or don't do it. Tell them this court won't force anyone to be a martyr on a tight deadline, Isaiah said. We'll take sealed statements on the record, identities protected pending statutory safeguards. Counsel will get summaries to challenge patterns. The goal is truth, not sacrifice. The afternoon pressed on. A city council member requested to speak. Isaiah declined a podium speech but accepted a sworn statement. Policy belongs under oath, not behind microphones. A public health researcher presented a scatterplot correlating stop density with hypertension rates. Lang objected. Isaiah took it as legislative fact-finding, not adjudicative proof, and everyone who understood those words nodded. Because the line between them matters when you're building something that needs to last past the headline. At 3:17 p.m., the bailiff passed Isaiah a note. Chief of Police requests private conference. Isaiah wrote a neat answer beneath it. Denied. Any input goes on the record. And slid it back, as if sending a tray across a cafeteria table. The door creaked and, to his credit, Chief Pritchard took the stand again without being summoned. Your Honor, he said, voice pitched lower, less television, more man. I'd like to make a statement under oath. Please specify, Isaiah said. Automatic body cam upload to an independent server, Pritchard said, eyes steady. Tighten the language on high crime area. Rewrite evaluation metrics to de-emphasize counts. Fund a unit to audit stop reports for articulation, not just spelling. Set up a civilian review council that isn't a press release. I'm not asking for a consent decree. I'm saying, if the court orders it, I can do it without getting eaten from the inside. Elena didn't smile. She wasn't here for speeches. We'll brief remedies, she said, but let the record reflect the city's own witness asked you to hold them to their better selves. Outside, the day tilted toward evening. Through the tall windows, the light went from pale to the color of old honey. Somewhere down the hall, a printer chewed through a stack of paper like an animal with a job. In the jury box, a young reporter typed the word unprecedented and then erased it, some instinct knowing it had been used too cheap too often. Counsel, Isaiah said at last, we'll take closings tomorrow before remedies. For now, one final witness. He glanced at Elena. You asked to reserve. She nodded, then surprised everyone. We call... She looked at Lang. Officer Mark Dwyer. Dwyer's chin lifted like a dare. He took the stand with a walk that said he preferred alleys to aisles. He swore in. He didn't look at Isaiah. He looked at Elena like she'd stolen something and he wanted it back. Officer, how long on the job? 11 years. You've been praised for your activity levels. Yup. Do you consider yourself a good cop? Best I know. Do good cops ever stop the wrong person? He smirked. Define wrong. Do phrases like furtive movements and appeared nervous help keep stops constitutional or help keep reports defensible? He leaned back, eyes half-lidded. Lady, the street isn't a textbook. No, she said, still gentle. It's where textbooks either mean something or get people hurt. You gonna ask me if I'm racist? I'm going to ask if you've ever written match the description when the only description you had was a silhouette. His jaw worked. He didn't answer. Silence is also a statement. No further questions, Elena said. Lang rose and offered a lifeline the size of a thread. Officer, do you risk your life for strangers? Every day. Do you want to go home alive? Every night. Do you resent a court that doesn't live on your block? Depends on the day. Isaiah looked at Dwyer. He didn't lecture. He didn't perform empathy. He did something harder. He saw a man who had built a house out of habits that no longer protected the people they were supposed to protect and who wasn't ready to say it out loud. Officer, you may step down. It was 4:45 when Elena stood again. Your Honor, one last item for today, she said, holding up a thin manila envelope like a strange bird. An affidavit from a Sinai nurse, redacted to protect employment, corroborating Mr. Brooks's demeanor on intake and details about other patients brought in under similar circumstances by these officers. Names withheld for now. Lang started to speak. Isaiah raised a finger. Received and sealed. Will address scope tomorrow. He looked out over the room. He didn't see a chapter break. He saw a day that had stretched to fit more truth than it had ever expected to hold. He saw a city trying, in fits and starts, to turn a camera on itself and keep it running past the part where the batteries usually die. Court will recess until 9 o'clock a.m., he said. The gavel sounded, one clean click. The crowd rose. Some slow, some eager, some with the exhausted grace of people who have learned to carry their hope like an old suitcase. In the aisle, Devin stood to let his mother hug him so hard, his glasses skewed. Andre Lewis walked past Dwyer without flinching, then stopped, turned, and said 4 quiet words. Write it clean, Mark. Dwyer didn't answer, but he heard him. You could tell by the way his shoulders squared, as if the sentence had landed and was going to live there a while. Out on the steps, microphones bloomed like wildflowers. A reporter shouted about consent decrees, another asked about politics, a third asked about numbers as if numbers were a species you could spot if you stared hard enough. Elena promised briefs. Lang said the word appeal with all its syllables. Chief Pritchard said review one more time, then caught himself, swallowed, and said reform. Isaiah didn't take the front steps. He took the quieter hallway toward chambers, past framed portraits of judges whose eyes had seen other versions of the same fight. The clothes change, the words change, the math stays the math. At the intersection near the elevators, Felicia was waiting. She leaned against the wall with her arms folded, ER badge tucked into her pocket, hair pulled back. "How's your blood pressure?" she asked, and it wasn't a joke. "High and useful," he said. She smoothed the crease at his shoulder like it might absorb a bruise. "Malik watched the stream in AP Gov. Says you're trending at lunch." "Tell him to trend his homework." She kissed his cheek, just there where the collar hid what had yellowed overnight. "Don't forget to ask for the thing you actually want," she whispered. "Not the thing you think they'll let you have." The elevator chimed. Parker appeared with a folder. "Tomorrow's calendar," she said, "and a draft order outline in case you want to pretend to sleep." He took it. "Thank you," he said, and meant not just the paper. That night the city hummed outside their windows, buses sighing at curbs, sirens far enough away to be somebody else's problem. Malik sat at the kitchen table, whiteboard out, sketching flowcharts of how a remedy could be constructed. Nia drew a cartoon of a body cam with eyelids propped open on toothpicks. The caption read, "No nap time during rights time." Felicia reheated leftover pasta and slid a plate to the end of the table where Isaiah would land when he finally put the pen down. He wrote until the words stopped coming. He read what he'd written with the eye of a man who knew that language is both scalpel and bandage, and that the hand holding it is accountable for where it cuts and how it heals. At midnight, he stood, found his jacket, and stepped outside for one slow lap around the block. Bronzeville slept like a neighborhood that had earned it the hard way. A cruiser rolled past and didn't slow. He nodded anyway. Back in bed, Felicia rolled toward him, half asleep. "Tomorrow," she murmured. "Tomorrow," he agreed. Morning would bring closings, testimony, the moment where he would let himself become a witness and then step back into the robe. Morning would bring remedies and pushback and headlines and years of work that would not care who first said the words, only whether someone kept saying them when nobody was listening. Morning would bring the part where a story stops being a story and starts being policy, which is just a city's way of telling the truth about who it loves. He closed his eyes on that thought and let the quiet have him for a few hours. The courthouse clock, 2 miles and a world away, kept moving in its careful circles, winding the story forward without announcing it, the way good chapter breaks do, not with a trumpet, but with a breath you didn't know you were holding, finally let go. The morning stepped in quietly, as if the courthouse had asked it to keep its voice down. Hallways smelled like copier toner and brewed coffee. A janitor's cart squeaked by, the wheels tracing a familiar route along marble that had seen more apologies than confessions. In chambers, Isaiah buttoned his charcoal suit, the one he wore when he needed to disappear into the role and let the work show. The robe hung on the coat tree for later, patient as a shadow. Courtroom 25 filled without fanfare. The same faces, a few new ones. Devin sat straighter today, a careful courage in the way his shoulders squared. Elena had that look defenders get when the finish line is near, but the ground is still loose. Eyes bright, jaw set. Lang's tie was a darker pinstripe, like he'd put his faith in lines. Pritchard was present with counsel, and the particular stillness of a man who knows his next sentences will follow him for a decade. Hale adjusted his cuffs and kept glancing toward the door like he might run if someone said the word. Dwyer watched the clock, because clocks are honest even when people aren't. The bailiff called the room to order. Isaiah surveyed it once, then spoke as if he were merely continuing a conversation everyone already knew how to have. Before closings, the record requires testimony from a witness who can't both preside and speak. To avoid even the appearance of impropriety, I will step off the bench. Judge Linda Park will preside during that portion. Afterward, I'll resume. No rustle in the gallery. Just the small sound of a city shifting its weight. Judge Park entered in a robe the color of fresh asphalt, her walk unhurried, her eyes taking inventory with the kindness of a school principal who could still make you sit up straight. Isaiah nodded to her and moved from the bench to the witness box, the way a man might cross a short bridge over a long drop. The oath sounded ordinary. His "I do" did not. He kept his voice level, facts stacked like bricks in a wall he was building for someone else to lean on later. I pulled into the Quick Go at Cicero and Lake. I was on my way home from Rush. My mother had a stent placed. I was dressed in sweats, a college hoodie. I inserted my card, started pumping. A marked unit circled. The spotlight hit. Officers approached with hands resting on holsters. I said, "Good evening, is there a problem?" They asked what I was doing there. I said, I'm buying gas. They requested ID without articulating a basis beyond match the description. I asked what description. I announced I was reaching for my wallet. Before I could retrieve it, I was pushed into the hood of my vehicle and handcuffed. I stated I was a judge. That was met with derision. He didn't dramatize what the metal felt like on his cheek. He didn't need to. People could hear it in the way he left a beat after the word handcuffed. At the station, he continued, I requested a phone call. It was delayed. During the delay, an officer, Andre Lewis, recognized me from a legal lecture and alerted the sergeant. My identification was then treated as valid. The captain's office offered privacy and coffee. I declined. I used the booking phone and called Judge Park. Did you resist? Elena asked, soft enough to keep the room from pretending it didn't already know. No, he said. Did the officers articulate specific, particularized facts that would have justified a Terry stop? No. Thank you, Elena said. Lang stood, the careful, narrow steps of a man walking a balcony with no railing. Your Honor, Judge Park, very limited questions. Proceed, she said. Judge Cole, you agree that officers are often required to make split-second decisions regarding safety. I agree. And that a person's failure to comply immediately can escalate risk on scene. Compliance is a two-way street, Isaiah said. It requires lawful commands delivered in a way a reasonable person can process. Lang nodded like he'd expected as much. No further questions. Judge Park thanked Isaiah, then turned to the room. The court appreciates the necessity of that testimony and the unusual posture today. I will return the bench to Judge Cole for closings and subsequently for any ruling. She stood. Isaiah rose with her, and for a breath the whole room felt the strangeness, the swapping of roles, the precise choreography required to keep faith with rules and with reality. Then Park exited, the bailiffs all rise, dissolving back into wood and light. Isaiah put the robe on again. It settled over his shoulders like work you were born into. Counsel, he said. Closings. Elena went first. She didn't pace. She didn't gesture much. She made eye contact with Devon's mother instead, as if reminding herself who the brief had always been written for. Your Honor, this case is not about a single night or a single name. It is about a pattern painted in plain language, by video, by data, by reluctant admissions, by the city's own chief. We saw a stop made on a pretext. We saw body cam gaps at the precise moments when accountability mattered most. We heard how phrases like furtive movements and appeared nervous function as passwords to get garbage past the gate. We watched senior leadership concede that performance metrics reward volume over legality. Mr. Brooks is not asking you to rewrite a city in one afternoon. He is asking you to do what courts do best: tell the truth about the facts in front of you and order remedies scaled to those facts. Suppress the lie. Plant something better where it stood. If justice without accountability is theater, then accountability without reform is just a carousel, spinning people through the same scene with different actors. We ask you to stop the ride. She sat, setting down a weight she'd carried far past the point her arms should have given out. Lang stood like a man fastening his vest in a moving car. His voice went smooth, almost soothing. Your Honor, my clients patrol neighborhoods where calls pile up and backup runs thin. They operate in the half-light between suspicion and harm. It is easy, too easy, to cut a snippet of video and a slice of a report and declare a whole story you do not live inside of. Dr. Ellison's charts show patterns. Patterns are not proof of what these officers saw, felt, believed in a moment that, if mishandled, gets them a folded flag. I'm not here to defend culture writ large. I am here to defend two men from being made into symbols that the city can pin its sins on and walk away absolved. If remedies are ordered, let them be careful, constitutional, and forward-facing. But do not pretend that suspending these two and moving some boxes on an org chart will save anyone's life. That work is broader, and it belongs to all of us. He sat, and the silence after was not agreement or disagreement, but respect. Klein from the state's attorney's office rose last, cautious language in both hands. The people do not oppose appropriate, tailored remedies, she said. We urge the court to consider the impact on pending prosecutions and to provide a mechanism for case review that is thorough but not destabilizing. Thank you, Isaiah said. He looked at the room again, then down at the order outline he'd marked at 2 a.m, when the city was quieter and the words came more honest. He closed the folder. He didn't want to read it. He wanted to say it like it had been earned. This court finds that the stop of Devin Brooks was unlawful. The record shows insufficient particularized suspicion to justify detention. The force used after that unlawful stop constitutes excessive force. The city's policies on paper are not matched by incentives in practice. The body cam gaps and after-the-fact dispatch edits undermine credibility in ways this court cannot ignore. Remedy must fit both harm and pattern. First, as to Officers Dwyer and Hale, 6-month suspension without pay. Before return to duty, completion of a training cycle audited by an external provider in procedural justice, bias recognition, and report articulation. Not a lecture. An audit. Pass-fail. Write the stop you would defend under oath because you will. Second, as to the 12th District's tools, body cameras will be configured with a hard lock. No manual shutoff once an encounter begins. Auto upload to an independent server within 1 hour of the end of the shift. Failure to produce footage when required triggers a presumption against the city's account unless the city can show by clear evidence that the failure was technical and not intentional. Third, as to performance metrics, the district will redesign officer evaluations to de-emphasize stop and arrest counts. In their place, a composite that values complaint-free contacts, community surveys, constitutional compliance in audits, and the accuracy and specificity of written articulations. Numbers tell a story. These need to be the right numbers. Fourth, as to oversight, establish a civilian review council with real teeth, subpoena power for records relevant to citizen complaints, binding recommendations on discipline absent a written rejection by the superintendent within 30 days, subject to court review. Seats reserved for residents of Garfield Park, North Lawndale, and Little Village. Time chapter 200 Malams. Meetings open, minutes posted. Fifth, as to sunlight, the city will publish quarterly dashboards in plain language. Stop counts, demographic breakdowns, hit rates, use of force incidents, complaint outcomes, citywide and by district. The dashboards will not hide in alphabet soup. If your grandmother can't read it, rewrite it. Sixth, as to backward-looking harm, the state's attorney is ordered to conduct, with defense counsel input, a 3-year audit of cases originating in the 12th District, where the initiating report relies primarily on furtive movements, high crime area, appeared nervous, or match the description without specific articulable facts. Where appropriate, the office will consent to vacatur, expungement, or other relief. This court will appoint a special master to track progress and mediate disputes. Seventh, as to Mr. Brooks, the court will set a separate hearing on damages. The parties are ordered to confer and report within 21 days. Any obstruction or resisting charges arising from the incident are dismissed with prejudice and will be expunged. He stopped. He could feel the room breathe, a collective exhale like the end of a long dive. He wasn't finished. Finally, he said, voice quieter, not because he doubted, but because he wanted each word to land upright. Culture eats policy if you don't feed them both. That is outside the reach of any one order, but not outside the reach of all of us. Chief Pritchard asked this court to hold his department to its better self. I will. But this order is not a curse. It is an invitation. Show your city what it looks like when accountability is not a press release, but a practice. He felt the robe's weight then, not burden exactly, but gravity. He turned toward Dwyer and Hale. Officer Hale, you asked to speak yesterday and did so in chambers. If you want to say something on the record now, I will allow it. If not, your silence is also a choice. It will be respected. Hale stood like a man whose knees remembered running. Your Honor, he said, raw in the throat, I thought I was good at my job because my numbers were good. I get now that's a lazy metric. I'm not going to stand here and promise a brand new person in 6 months. I can promise to write what I actually see and not what the template tells me to see. And I can promise to let the camera roll. He sat. Dwyer stared straight ahead, jaw locked, the muscle flicking like a metronome. Isaiah didn't call on him. Not everyone's clock strikes at the same hour. Anything further from counsel? Lang rose out of reflex, then shook his head. Elena whispered to Devon, who nodded and wiped his cheek with the fast, embarrassed motion of a man who doesn't want the camera to see his tears. Klein jotted a note that read, simply, audit, team. Then this is the order of the court, Isaiah said. Written findings to follow. Court is adjourned. One sound of the gavel, no more. In the gallery, Mrs. Arnett pressed her church fan against her chest and mouthed, "Thank you," to no one in particular. The bodega owner leaned over the pew to shake Andre's hand. Cameras blinked alive, then down, as if themselves tired of flashing at pain. Pritchard walked to the aisle, paused, then offered a hand to Elena. She took it. Not absolution. Contact. In the hallway, the press tried to build a scrum. Elena kept her words clean and short. We asked for receipts, and we got some. Now we protect them from being cooked. Lang chose, caution, we will evaluate appeal issues and work with the city to comply where possible. Pritchard said, we start retooling today, and for the first time in 2 days, didn't say review. Isaiah took the back route to Chambers. Park was waiting at his door, an open palm and a wry smile. You threaded a very messy needle, she said. Nice stitch. Thank you for the assist, he said. Don't thank me, she said. Thank your own outline, and go drink water. You look like a raisin in a robe. He laughed. It shook something loose in his chest he hadn't realized he'd been bracing. Felicia texted a heart. Malik texted a screenshot of a group chat. AP Gov says he bodied them with Carousel. Nia sent a photo of her new cartoon, a gavel, and a garden trowel trading tools. The caption, "Verdicts are seed packets." It made him stupidly proud. He sat at his desk and let the noise outside move past him like weather. There would be motions tomorrow and motions after that. There would be union statements and council hearings and a budget fight that would make today's arguments look like finger painting. There would be mistakes. There would be officers who hated the reforms loudly, and ones who hated them privately, and ones who surprised themselves by liking how it felt to do the job by the book and by the heart. There would be community members who said it wasn't enough. They would be right. There would be others who said it was too much. They would be wrong. There would be a city in between, trying to become something truer than the story it had told about itself. He signed the minute order for distribution and set the pen down. In the tiny quiet that followed, he looked up at the framed oath on the wall, the one with the words that felt thin until you put your whole weight on them. Administer justice without respect to persons. People like to quote the first part. Not as many remembered the second clause, and do equal right to the poor and to the rich. He'd never figured out how to embroider that on a system, but today felt like thread. He stood to leave, then stopped. Out the window, down on the street, near the revolving doors, he saw Hale step away from a knot of officers and walk alone toward Devin and his mother. Their exchange was brief. No hug, no theatrics, a nod, a hand extended, a sentence only they would carry home. Devin's mother squeezed her son's shoulder afterward, the way moms do when they want to anchor you to a sidewalk so the wind can't take you. The wind didn't. Isaiah turned off the lamp. The hallway light found him anyway. He thought of the gas pump at dusk, the click of the nozzle, the smallness of ordinary kindness when it finally returns to the place where it broke. He thought of cameras that don't nap, of reports written like they expect daylight to read them, of dashboards someone's grandmother could pull up on a phone and understand in a kitchen lit by a busted bulb and 1,000 hard-earned hopes. He closed the door. The long day knew where to go next without being told, and when the elevator doors slid open and he stepped inside, it felt less like an ending than like a hinge quietly doing its job, swinging a city 1 degree toward the light, so gradual you might miss it if you weren't paying attention, so real you'd feel it when you touched the doorknob of tomorrow. The first snow didn't stick. It fell in thin chalk lines that turned to water before they hit the Garfield Park Community Center steps, a whisper of winter that couldn't quite make up its mind. Folding chairs scraped across a scuffed gym floor. A table along the wall held a battered coffee urn that hissed like it resented its job, a tray of store-bought lemon bars, aluminum pans of tamales still steaming. Volunteers taped paper signs, restrooms, childcare, and somebody wrestled a squeaky mic into behaving. The room smelled like cumin, copier ink, and a city trying again. 6 months had a way of sounding longer than it felt. In Isaiah's body, it lived as a stack of early mornings and late nights, as emails with subject lines that began "quick note" and ended 3 scrolls down with "one last thing," as meetings where everybody agreed the principle was simple and the implementation was a Rubik's Cube with a timer. Still, here they were, the first quarterly meeting of the Police Accountability Council. Chairs mostly filled, people talking to one another instead of about one another. Isaiah stood at the side of the room, checking the slide deck one more time. Not because it would change, but because ritual makes you feel like outcomes are negotiable. Felicia moved through the crowd with 2 paper cups, 1 coffee, 1 tea, like a field nurse who hadn't lost her triage instincts just because she wasn't in scrubs. She handed him the tea. "Your throat," she said, "and your blood pressure probably." "You are slandering the health of a man who hasn't had time to develop hypertension," he said, and took a grateful sip. "Tell that to the cortisol factory in your adrenal glands," she said, bumping his shoulder with hers. "Breathe. You're not on the bench tonight. You're just the guy with the clicker." He looked around. The front row held faces that had become familiar. Elena, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back, leaning forward like even her posture could testify. Devin and his mother, dressed neat like Sundays. The pride they had in each other, a visible thing that didn't need an interpreter. Andre Lewis, in a suit a touch big at the shoulders, the shy smile of someone promoted sooner than he expected and determined to outrun his doubts. Chief Pritchard sat beside a deputy and an attorney, expression neutral, the kind you practice in a mirror before the cameras find you. A few rows back, Scott Hale, haircut shorter, the look of a man who knows eyes might be on him and wants to give them less to read. Mark Dwyer was near the exit, standing despite empty chairs, hands in pockets, hat in hand, like he hadn't decided whether he was staying. Nia slipped in beside Malik on the second row, a sketch pad balanced on her knee. She gave her dad a thumbs up that looked more like a push. Malik, taller now somehow, wore his JV warm-up jacket and that "I'm not nervous but I am" set to his mouth. Isaiah had learned it was less about what he said and more about whether they could imagine saying it themselves one day without flinching. He tapped the mic. It squealed, then settled. "Good evening," he said. The gym swallowed the first word, then gave the rest back. "Thank you for coming out on a night when Netflix is easier and your couches are kinder. We've got a lot to cover, and I'm going to try to be the kind of boring that means you leave with more information than you walked in with." A chuckle drifted like a small tide. He clicked to the first slide. High, bold, uncomplicated font. No fancy transitions. Across the top, 12th District, 6-month check-in. "Let's start with the numbers," he said, "because we change the numbers we reward." The graph wasn't complicated, that was the point. Discretionary stops, those not triggered by an active call, are down 42% valley to peak. Hit rates, meaning stops that actually find contraband or lead to a legitimate arrest, are up. Use of force incidents down 28%. A low murmur, more exhale than disbelief. Pritchard's jaw worked once. Elena scribbled in a spiral margin like she was keeping score. Devin's mother nodded to herself the way churchwomen nod when a hymn lands right. "You'll hear the critique that fewer stops means more crime," Isaiah said. "The clearance rates tell a different story. They're stable. In some categories, improved by a hair. The world did not end when we stopped fishing with a net that only fit one river." He clicked again. A pie chart, then a table. Shapes and colors simple enough that a grandmother with a cracked phone could read it at a bus stop. Demographics, complaint outcomes, body cam compliance. "Cameras," he said. "The hard lock is in place. Uploads auto by end of shift. Compliance sits at 94%. That means 6% of encounters that should have footage don't. When that happens, we default against the city's narrative unless they can prove a technical error. The sky hasn't fallen. The roof's just got fewer leaks." A hand from the back. "How many officers disciplined for non-compliance?" 8, Isaiah said. 2 suspensions, 6 formal reprimands with additional training. The point is to change behavior before we accept it as a personality trait. He moved fast enough to fend off boredom, slow enough to let pride keep pace with skepticism. The Civilian Review Council, your council, held 3 hearings. We issued 5 binding disciplinary recommendations. The superintendent accepted 4. He wrote a rejection on 1, which went to court. The court sided with the council. That matters. He looked toward Andre. We also created a constitutional policing unit. Officer Lewis is leading it. It might be the least sexy title in the building, but it's some of the most important work. Rookies ride with mentors who grade the report before the sergeant does. If the words furtive, nervous, or high crime appear without specifics, the report goes back. Write the stop you'd defend under oath isn't a slogan, it's a grade. Andre flushed and half shrugged, wanting to vanish and be seen at the same time. A woman near him clapped once, the row followed. Now, Isaiah said, palm up, turning the sermon, data is the map. It's not the street. On the street, people live. So let's talk about people. He set the clicker down. Devin. Devin looked to Elena, then to his mom. He stood, walked to the mic, adjusted it down. I go to work, same as before, he said. I go to class at night now, data analysis. I help with the dashboard. I didn't think numbers were my thing, but it turns out telling the truth is everyone's thing. You just find your way to it. A soft laugh rippled, genuine. 2 weeks ago, I was driving home late. A cruiser fell in behind me. I felt that old heat in my chest, like my heart wanted to run before my foot did. They didn't stop me. Maybe I'm just lucky, but I want more than luck for my mom. For your moms. That's it. He stepped back. A hush held one beat past humor, then clapping. Ragged, real. The kind you hear after a quiet testimony that's true. Hale lifted a hand. Isaiah nodded. I asked to talk at roll call last month, Hale said, staying in his seat like testing the floor. Told the guys what the judge said. Write what you actually see. Let the camera roll. I figured they'd laugh me out. Some did, some didn't. We ran a scenario and rewrote the stop report 5 times until a rookie could read it and believe it. That rookie wrote a clean one last week. It felt different. He glanced at Devin. Not asking for cookies, just saying, I can do my job and sleep, finally. From near the exit, Dwyer's voice. I went to the North Lawndale Youth Council thing. Heads turned. Surprise has a sound. I didn't talk. I listened. It was loud. I wrote some stuff down. Haven't decided who to show it to. That's all. Thanks, Isaiah said, resisting the urge to narrate a first step. Felicia took the mic next. I'm an ER doctor, she said, and last time I checked, we don't fix panic with a louder voice. We did a training with 12th District on trauma, cortisol, tunnel vision, the body's oh no button. 2 older officers told me no one had explained why a compliant person might look nervous when they're actually flooded. It cost 90 minutes and a box of donuts. We can scale that. A retired teacher raised a hand. How do we know this isn't a season? Everybody behaves while eyes are on them. Isaiah nodded. Fair question. We built in eyes you can't turn off. Public dashboards, body cam audits, a civilian counsel with teeth, a special master who will be very annoying when deadlines slip. But you're right, seasons change when we stop showing up. So don't. Show up when this room is less full and the coffee is worse. Teens whispered along the wall, then one stepped forward. Do you need more youth on the council? We got time after practice, except game days. Apply, Isaiah said, smiling. Bring your schedule. We'll work around it. He ended the formal part without a big finish. The city trusted a quiet period more than a rousing paragraph. We'll break into stations, data questions there, complaint process there, training demos in the parking lot with Andre, coffee, wherever the line ends. People stood and moved, conversations forming like weather systems. Isaiah watched a circle with Pritchard, Elena, and 2 mothers lean in over a pie chart and argue without shouting. Watched Andre explain the difference between reasonable suspicion and vibes to rookies and teens, rookies taking notes. Watched Nia sketch a body cam with big, honest eyes. I don't nap. In the corner, Devin helped a man in a faded socks hat pull up the dashboard on a cracked phone. Hit the menu, Devin said. No, the other 3 lines. There you go. See? It's not hiding from you anymore. A bass thrum from a passing car rolled through the gym. Outside, a bus hissed and knelt with giant courtesy. At the refreshment table, Raj Singh poured coffee like a bartender who likes his regulars. Judge, he nodded, handing over a cup. Ready for my update? Always. New plaques up, Raj said. Between pumps 6 and 7. Bronze. On this corner, we chose receipts over rumors. Teens take pictures with it. I keep the audio cables replaced now. Cameras don't go dark. not even when squirrels chew things. Monthly dialogue circles moved to Sunday afternoons. Cops, neighbors, and a pastor with pound cake. The officer who pushed my cousin last year said he was wrong. In public. That's not nothing. It's the opposite of nothing, Isaiah said. Raj leaned in. I've started spotting the difference. Officers coming to get numbers versus officers coming to keep us safe. One looks past you, the pin. Other looks at you, it's in the eyes. Policy can teach the muscles, Isaiah said. Community teaches the eyes. You get poetic when your tea hits, Raj grinned. Finish it. I'll bring an oatmeal cookie that deserves awards. Later, when chairs were half empty and the floor wore a confetti of crumbs, Isaiah slipped into colder air. The sky held a thin violet and one contrail that refused to fade. He drifted toward Cicero and Lake. The quick-go canopy lights flickered with their usual impatience. A teen in a puffer begged an old Corolla to start, lost, then slumped. A rookie, Patel stitched over his pocket, walked up, hands visible, chin lifted in hello, not command. You okay? Want a tow call? I've got a jump kit, he said. You got one of those little boxes. My uncle's is like magic. Exactly, Patel smiled. Like a cell phone that believes in you. Leads clipped. Try it. The engine coughed, rallied, caught. The kid whooped. Then, out of old habit, sorry, sir. Only debt is, don't drive to Indiana on that battery tonight, Patel said. Bet. The teen spotted Isaiah, half wave, uncertain. Isaiah mirrored it, palm up, blessing without words. Across the lot, Raj locked the squeegee bin, pointed at the plaque, then at Isaiah. Crazy world, right? Isaiah smiled, his phone buzzed. Malik, Coach says if clearance rates stay stable, he wants a CPD rep to talk to the team about stops, rules of engagement. You cool? Isaiah, yes, I'll go with you. Bring Naya. She'll draw them into telling the truth. Malik, LOL bet she will. Another text, Park. Time saws 200 milliamps. City Council may trim oversight budget in subcommittee next week. Coffee tomorrow? We sharpen knives. Isaiah sent a thumbs up and a coffee emoji. Wrong for a judge, perfect for a friend. He turned for home. Dwyer stood on the sidewalk, hat still in hand, watching traffic like a man counting the beats of a neighborhood's pulse. Isaiah stopped beside him. You hate me? Dwyer asked. No heat. I don't know you, Isaiah said. I hate what you did. I love what you could choose. Dwyer nodded. Truth tasted, hard to keep down. I don't want to be a headline. Good, Isaiah said. Be a paragraph in someone else's better story. Dwyer huffed. That's corny. Corn feeds cities, Isaiah said. Dwyer rolled his eyes, shook his head, and walked toward a squad car like maybe the next stop he wrote would be for daylight. Home held the sounds that make shoulders drop. A thud of a ball upstairs. Felicia's playlist low in the kitchen, Nia's pencil scratching like a cricket. Soup in his hands, no questions, just steam. How was it? She asked anyway. Messy, real, better. 3 of my favorite adjectives. She smiled. Later at the table, Nia revealed a cartoon, a gavel and a garden trowel swapping tools midair. Verdicts are seed packets. That's going on the dashboard, he said. You can't put my art on a government site without paying me, she deadpanned. How much? $1 and a milkshake. Inflation, he sighed. I'll see the Appropriations Committee. Laughter rose and touched the ceiling, proof the roof and the people beneath it were doing their jobs. When the house finally quieted, Isaiah stepped into the small office where the oath hung. He read it, not because he didn't know it, but because he needed to hear it in the voice of the man he wanted to be. Do equal right to the poor and to the rich. Tonight it sounded less like audacity and more like a shopping list taped to the fridge so you can't pretend you forgot the eggs. His phone buzzed one last time. My son got stopped last year for looking around too much. He walks past a cruiser now and nothing happens. I don't know if that's you, but thank you if it is. He didn't write back. You don't answer a prayer with words. You answer it by showing up tomorrow. The city breathed in and out. Siren somewhere, laughter somewhere else, a bus brake sigh. Under the thin snow, ground waiting for seed. He turned off the light. Step 4 creaked like it had since the first night. He lay down. Felicia turned toward him, present, eyes closed. He thought of the quick go plaque, a rookie with a jump kit, a council room with more teenagers than cynics, a pie chart an abuela could read, a stop report written like its author planned to stand behind it under oath and under sunlight. He thought of a man who didn't want to be a headline, and a boy who wanted a milkshake, and a city that, finally, had a hinge where there used to be a wall. This wasn't happily ever after. It was better than before. The work would be there in the morning. Coffee breath and a long to-do list. He would meet it at the door, not as savior, not as symbol, but as a man with a clicker, a robe, and a garden trowel, ready to trade tools again and again, until the story the city tells about itself matches the one it is brave enough to live. Justice didn't come in a headline. It came in small, stubborn steps. A rookie who left his hand on the wheel instead of his holster. A mother who finally slept through the night. A city learning to look itself in the mirror without flinching. If this story moved you, don't just scroll past it. Share it. Talk about it. Because every time we tell the truth out loud, the system has to listen a little harder. Thank you for staying till the end. You didn't just watch a story. You stood witness to one. And sometimes that is how change begins.